I had the privilege of being able to participate last year. So I'm saying this from experience, not just as a recruitment pitch. The U.S. in general recognizes the tremendous role that natural gas has in powering modern economies. And that fact was made even more clear as Europe endured an energy crisis in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. Gas is a major part of the global energy mix. And countries such as Mozambique, gas represents a source of tremendous development potential, both in its own energy sector, its own industrialization, and its ability to have an impact as a major player in the world. I also want to take this time to underscore and highlight that there are major opportunities for additional American companies to get involved in the LNG sector in Mozambique. The Rovuma Basin in northern Mozambique holds approximately 150 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It was discovered by the Anadarko company a little over 10 years ago and is now on the cusp of development. And it's already producing some of the world's cleanest, it's still a fossil fuel, but it's some of the best quality natural gas and makes it a good investment for more conscious, climate conscious stakeholders. Indeed, the first LNG gas shipments were made from the offshore floating LNG platform last November. And with that, Mozambique has taken its first steps to becoming a major LNG exporter. Just to give you a sense of size, the floating LNG, it's almost like it's a ship of sorts, except it has to be towed. It doesn't have its own powertrain, but it is a facility that produces enough and liquefies enough natural gas from below the seabed to provide enough energy to power Hong Kong for an entire year. And the scale of that development is really an order of magnitude less than what will be built onshore. Indeed, the vast potential of the Rovuma gas basin has generated already planned $50 billion in proposed investments. And that represents, again, an opportunity for American companies to take part through trade and investment and to help drive Mozambique's economic growth. American companies have a long history of expertise in LNG, and we're excited to see American businesses, not only the majors, but those that support that industry, bring their knowledge and experience to Mozambique. Within the Rovuma Basin, we have the forthcoming investments supported by U.S. institutions are among the largest on the continent, historically and currently. The U.S. Export-Import Bank made a $4.7 billion loan commitment to the Area 1 project. That's the project that was initially developed by Anadarko and is now being managed by Total. And the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, or U.S. DFC, has extended $1.5 billion in political risk insurance to the Rovuma LNG project consortium in Area 4. And that, just so you don't get too confused, and I'm sure some of our other colleagues will speak about it, but basically the upstream, if I got this right, I'm pretty sure of it, but if I got it right, it's the upstream is run by Eni, and the onshore liquefaction and onshore facilities and trains on land will be managed by Exxon. These projects are expected to generate millions of tons of LNG per year and add about $15 billion per year to the Mozambican economy. And over the life of the project, contribute tens of billions of dollars to the government revenues over that lifetime of the project. And the government of Mozambique is currently in the process of drafting. They've drafted, but now the National Assembly is working on a sovereign wealth fund for how to manage the investment income for this generation of needs that are acute in Mozambique, but also for the future generations of Mozambicans in the decades to come. And I think that will help to guarantee the responsible management of those resources that are consistent with the Santiago principles. Mozambique is also committed to expanding its renewable energy sector. And that country has already made significant progress. Anybody who lives in Maputo knows that much of the energy that powers what we are doing, the office that I'm in, is from hydropower. But there's also wind and solar. And it's an ideal location for renewable energy projects, given the rivers that flow east-west through the country, the wind that blows across it and from the sea, and the sun that hits the country from Maputo all the way up to the Rovuma on the border with Tanzania. The U.S. government has supported those efforts, including feasibility studies for wind farms in Maputo province, just not far from here, and in Nacala, and a solar farm in Tet. Mozambique recently announced that it will require biofuel to be mixed with all imported fuels. And that opens up another area of opportunity where U.S. companies have deep expertise. Mozambique has the largest power pool or power generation potential in the region and is a key exporter to the Southern African Power Pool, or SAPP. And for anybody who's traveled to our neighbor, South Africa, you can understand the great need for power in this region, not just in South Africa, but throughout the region. And so both with natural gas, but also with the renewables and hydropower in particular, that is a tremendous amount, a tremendous potential that the Mozambique government and private sector are really committed to expanding. In conclusion, I want to reiterate the tremendous potential for American companies to get involved. So come to the conference. And whether that's in gas or in the burgeoning renewables, U.S. companies have a great opportunity to contribute to economic growth, energy security, and that will help with the global effort to transition to greener energy sources. There really is potential in Southern Africa for green hydrogen. There's also potential for carbon credits, and we're doing another major investment with coming this summer of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which will be building on some of the biodiversity and bio potential for blue carbon sequestration of carbon dioxide through the huge coastline and mangroves and other sources of seagrass and algae that apparently can lock in tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide in that blue carbon sphere, which is very new but very significant here in Mozambique. So we at the embassy, both the Foreign Commercial Service and myself as the Chief of Mission, are committed to supporting our partners in Mozambique and help it as it constructs a prosperous and stable future for all of its citizens. And we really hope and look forward to supporting American companies that are coming or considering coming. And they've recently announced, the government, as part of its economic reforms, has announced a project of visa-free travel for tourism and business travel. And that has been a huge impediment in the past. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll see some new regulations that will make it a lot easier to do, to register online, but to make it much easier for business travel here to scout out opportunities for future investment. So thank you, and back over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for the welcome remarks. And so without further ado, next we have our commercial counselor at the U.S. Embassy, Mr. Taylor Moore. Taylor, over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. My slides. Okay. Can you see the slides okay?
Yes, you can. If you could make it full, there we go, full screen. Thank you.
Excellent. For those unfamiliar, Mozambique is a Portuguese-speaking country of about 33 million people and a GDP of about 18 billion. At 2,300 kilometers, the country's length is about the length of the U.S. eastern seaboard, or from Miami, Florida to Portland, Maine. After a toughless decade, the country is set to return to high growth over the next 3 years, averaging about 6% GDP growth. The country's industrialization plan, or PRONAI, calls for the establishment of industrial and agricultural processing parks to be built across the country with many tax and other incentives, pointing to future energy needs and growth. The rich mineral deposits in the country also call for extensive mining and minerals processing, steel manufacturing, including electric arc furnaces, and down the road, there are plans for green and blue hydrogen potential. The government of Mozambique announced the president's economic acceleration package, which the ambassador alluded to a second ago, in August 2022. There are 20 wide-ranging reforms, but I'll mention just a couple of them that might be of interest. Part of it is a simplification of capital repatriation procedures, a VAT exemption for imports of equipment for agriculture and electrification, the mandatory blending of imported fuels with biofuels, which we see is creating demand for ethanol and biodiesel in the short to medium term, and related equipment as Mozambique builds out its own domestic capacity. This is the creation of a mutual to help Mozambican companies borrow at a lower cost and thus be better able to finance their capex, which is important to all U.S. companies looking to export their equipment to Mozambique. And again, as the ambassador mentioned, there are recent revisions to the visa regime for entering the country with a new e-visa system online, making it much simpler to apply to enter the country, and a visa waiver for U.S. citizens that should be promulgated very, very soon. Since my fellow presenters are going to present on LNG projects, I'd like to focus my next couple remarks on power generation and transmission. Solar leads the way in project numbers with 4 ongoing projects in development and more to be announced through Government of Mozambique's tendering process. Mozambique has already launched a number of successful renewable energy projects, including solar plants to take advantage of its estimated 23,000 gigawatts of solar energy generation potential. Commercial scale wind projects under development to take advantage of its 4.5 gigawatts of wind power potential. However, hydropower still dominates the Mozambican power mix in megawatts, really covering about 60% of Mozambique's power generation for the foreseeable future. Overall, it has about 12.5 gigawatts of hydropower potential led by Cahora Dam, a long-standing 2-gigawatt dam, but Mozambique's next flagship project is the Mpandiankua 1.5 gigawatt dam that's currently undergoing a strategic partner search. Battery storage is also new to the country. The local electric utilities hope to use battery storage as a grid stabilization tool, as well as to complement its ongoing and future solar projects. There are also major opportunities in transmission lines. The Energy for All, or Energia para Todos, is Mozambique's goal of universal electricity access by 2030, which means an average of 120,000 new on-grid connections per year through the decade. Mozambique is positioning itself to become the major energy exporter for the SADC region, or Southern African Development Community region. The country already exports 2,500 megawatts to South Africa, with other importing countries, including Zambia and Zimbabwe. The region is also well connected to the Southern Africa power pool. There are transmission opportunities in both high voltage AC and high voltage DC. And the transmission backbone project to connect the northern and central grids with the southern grids, CESL, is worth over $1 billion and is part of the overall strategic package with the Mpandiankua Dam that's under development. The project financing is available from development banks, including from African Development Bank, AfroXM, our own Development Finance Corporation, and under certain occasions, the U.S. Export-Import Bank. Mozambique's lack of technical expertise means that project holders still face difficulties packaging their projects in a way that is bankable. But the new electricity law contains provisions covering both renewables and independent power producers that will ease the process for including on-grid and off-grid projects. Finally, as the ambassador mentioned, we are pleased to see ENI's floating LNG platform begin exporting LNG in last November. While the onshore projects led by Exxon and Total are still paused due to Total's force majeure, we have seen some positive developments in recent months that could lead to the resumption of progress. I look forward to hearing an update from the speaker from INP next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taylor. That was an interesting presentation. And as up next, we have Dr. José Branquinho. He is a board member at INP, which is the National Petroleum Institute. Dr. Branquinho, you are very welcome. You are on mute. Dr. Branquinho, I think you're good to go.
Oh, can you give me a minute?
Of course.
I don't know what's going on here.
I usually just suggest sharing the content again. That usually works for me.
Okay, I think I'm back. Sorry. Am I still on mute?
No, you are. We can hear you fine.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And sorry for the incident. Okay, I will start with my presentation, talking about the content of my presentation. First of all, I'll go about the legal framework and some of the fiscal terms. The sedimentary basins where the activity of exploration and production of hydrocarbons is taking place in Mozambique. I'll talk a little bit of licensing rounds in terms of history, what has been undertaken and what is the present situation. I'll talk about the active concessions, exploration status. I'll talk a little bit the current gas master plan, and I'll talk about current projects. Okay. So when it comes to the legal framework, the exploration and production of hydrocarbons in Mozambique is covered under the Petroleum Law number 21/2014 of 18 of August. And this law is regulated by a petroleum operations regulation of 2015. We have a model contract of 2016, and we have a strategy for licensing of exploration acreage. So in terms of sedimentary basins where the exploration activity is taking place, it's worth to mention that we have two main basins, one in the north, which is depicted as number one, which is the Rovuma Basin, and central and southern Mozambique basin, which is called Mozambique Basin. And there are other sedimentary basins, but these basins are marginal when it comes to exploratory activity. So in terms of licensing round, the initial licensing round that was undertaken in Mozambique was back in 1984. That was followed by the one in 2005, which was basically concentrated over the Rovuma Basin. As we can see in the picture, at that time we had about 5 areas in that round. And it happened that that was under this round that the license that were successfully in terms of exploration and finding of hydrocarbons. So this was the critical license round in order to find hydrocarbons. Then we had the additional license rounds in 2007, 2009, and 2014, where we had the 50 licensing round. So back in 2021, we undertook the 6th licensing round, and you can see along the coast all the blocks that were part of this bidding round. So in total, it was 16 areas under the round. So when it comes to the process of the round itself, the launching was on the 25th of November. Then we have gone through a pre-qualification process until the 28th of February of 2022. We have announced the pre-qualified companies back in March of 2022. Then we had the closure of the bidding round on early November 2022. We have evaluated the bids that have been submitted by pre-qualified companies, and we have announced the results at the end of December last year. And in connection with this process, it's worth to mention that we are now under the discussions with the companies that have been selected at the bid, as the bid winners. So the blocks that have been selected or that have been awarded to the companies are the ones that lies in this region here, where we have the green blocks, and we have the 2 southernmost blocks in the Savo region that has been awarded as well. So we are hopefully that we will close this process by June of this year and have the contract signed. And in the second semester of 2023, we will have the license up and running and performing the exploration activities. So this is the situation when it comes to active license rounds. As we can see, we have license throughout the country. In the northern part of the country, where we have Area 1 and Area 4, which are operated by Total Energies and MRV, respectively. And when we go to the southern part of the Rovuma Basin, we have the Angosha region, where we have 2 blocks. One that is the A5A, and the other one, the adjacent one, which is the A5B. Additionally, in the southern part of the country, we have 2 blocks that are almost in the process of cessation of exploratory activities due to the fact that there have been exploratory activities that didn't manage to have good results, and as a consequence of that, we are now in the process of closing these 2 licenses. But additionally, in the onshore part of the country, in the Mozambique Basin, we have the Buzi block that can be seen there, depicted in brown, and we have 2 other licenses down in the south, in the Panentemani area, which has the PPA, which is the Petroleum Production Agreement area, which is operated by Sasol, and we have the PSA area that is also operated by Sasol. And we have another area down in the south, which is the Buzi license. So this is the situation when it comes to active license. And as a matter of fact, it's worth to mention that in the area A5A, which is depicted here in yellow, as well as in Panda and Temane PT5C, now there are exploratory activities taking place. So there is a drilling rig that just arrived last week, and it's going to start the drilling of one exploration well. As a matter of fact, it has also already started the drilling of a pilot hole. And down in the south, in Panda and Temane, there is an exploration activities taking place as well. There have been a drilling of one well, and now there is a drilling of the second well. So this is the situation when it comes to the work program that is going to be undertaken in the areas that are active when it comes to drilling activities. So it's important to highlight that we will have about 4 wells being drilled in the area PT5C, and we will have a total of 6 wells to be drilled in A5A, and all of that will depend on the success of the initial wells. If the initial wells are successful, we are going to witness a situation of drilling of additional wells. When it comes to the potential of the country, since the beginning of the exploration activities, significant amount of resources have been discovered in Mozambique. As we can see here in the Mozambique basin, we have around 60 TCFs of gas in situ, from which about 4 can be recoverable. And in Rovuma area, we have about 174 TCFs, from which we can have about 126 TCFs to be recoverable. But additionally, from natural gas, we also have other resources like the light oil in the Panda and Temane area, where we can have about 165 million barrels of oil in situ, from which about 11 million barrels can be recoverable. And from these resources that have been discovered in the past, there was a need to develop a gas master plan. And this gas master plan was developed back in 2014 as a guiding and a planning instrument for the government when it comes to the use of the natural gas resources that have been discovered. So it has been an instrumental tool, the gas master plan, which in fact consider 4 main areas of use of natural gas. Although the situation has now changed, so the gas to liquid, it was the priority by the time of the development of this tool. But these days, we more consider the chemical industry as petrochemical industry as one of the most relevant one, with the development of fertilizers that can be used in country as well as can be exported to the region and globally. But apart from that, we have the development of power supply plants as one of the main priorities. So it was mentioned that the country now is looking forward in order to make power available for most of the citizens of Mozambique. So, but apart from Mozambique, the region itself it lacks power supply, and Mozambique can be a significant hub in order to provide this power to the region. So it's one of the areas in which the potentially investors from US can consider to put their investments. But apart from that, apart from that, we can have the natural gas being used in different industries like beverage, cements, glass, or the food industry as well. So the gas master plan is very relevant tool since it gives us all these priorities when it comes to the use of natural gas. As a matter of fact, from the projects that have been under development in Mozambique, and as part of one of the legal requirements in which about 25% of natural gas that is produced in Mozambique should be made available in country. So there have been commitments in order to have natural gas available in Mozambique. So from the area 1 and area 4, we have about 900 million scuffs per day available, or to be made available to the domestic market. Apart from that, in Mozambique Basin, we have Sasol as one of the player, and Sasol has made available about 27 petajoules per annum of natural gas for the local market as well, and additional 23 petajoules of natural gas, which totalize about 50 petajoules of natural gas. When it comes to available projects or projects under development, you will know that we have a project in Pan and Timane area, a project that started back in 2000 with the signature of this contract, and so the development started back in 2001, and about 24 wells to be used in the production have been put in place, and the central processing facilities installed in Temane area, they have a capacity of processing about 900 or 197 million gigajoules per annum. It's now under the process of workover since it has been in production for about 20 years. So there is a project going on in order to improve the plateau and extend the production of the Panda and Temane gas fields. Apart from that, we have the Area 4 Coral South project, which has the plan of development submitted back in 2016. And there's been a final investment decision back in 2017. And it was meant to produce about 3.4 million tons per annum. So in fact, we have managed to achieve a situation of gas production from October of last year, and the first cargo of LNG was occurred in November 2022. Apart from that, in the Pan and Temane area, we have another project, which is the project under the production sharing agreement area. And this production sharing agreement area was signed back in 2000. And there have been a development plan that was initially submitted in 2016, and it was approved at that time. But this plan of development were submitted as an amendment back in 2020, and it was then approved. And there have been implementation of power production project, which will be the production of natural gas will be coupled with the production of LPG to be consumed in country, which is about 30,000 tons per annum to be produced. And for the time being, there is a drilling of different wells in order to allow the production of natural gas in that specific area. Another project that was approved back in 2019 was the Golfinho Atum project in Area 1. But you will know that due to the security issues, this project was put under force majeure. Equally, in the Area 4, there is a project that has been approved in 2019, and it was meant to produce about 7.6 million tons per annum of LNG. But under the same circumstance, this area is under force majeure. So these projects are now suspended, and there are efforts in order to make these projects to restart. So under the current projects, I would like to highlight that what you can see on the top, these are the projects that are being considered for the Rovuma Basin, under which we expect that there will be investments of over $50 billion. And in Mozambique Basin, in its turn, there are projects that produce power. So we have about three gas-fired power stations that produce in total 450 megawatts. And in the PPA area, there is also in the Mozambique PSA area, we have a project that is under construction now in order to produce 450 megawatts. And on the Pande and Temane PPA area, there are these three fired stations that are producing almost 450 megawatts. And there are plans to connect, in terms of gas supply, over 2,000 households. So this is the situation when it comes to the project, as well as use of natural gas in the southern part of the country. So all in all, what we can say is that, in order to conclude, all in all, what we can say is that there are available opportunities in order to invest in exploration in Mozambique, as well as to invest in development of hydrocarbons in Mozambique. There is also a potential in order to invest in different kind of service in order to help the industry to move into development and production. When it comes to the availability of natural gas in order to develop utilization of natural gas, as it has been mentioned, there is gas availability, although it's dependent on the beginning of production from the projects that we have mentioned, specifically the LNG projects. So there is potential in country in order to develop a petrochemical industry, in order to develop electricity, and in order to develop heating that is necessary for different kinds of industries. So all in all, it's what I can say in terms of potential for investments in Mozambique in the oil and gas industries. Thank you very much, and we are open for the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Branquinho. That was very interesting indeed. I wanted, before we move on to our next speaker, I did want to thank anyone that's already asking questions in the chat box. For those of you who joined in a little bit later, I encourage you to write your questions on the Q&A option, which is located on the bottom right of your screen. We will either answer them via writing or read them out at the end of the show and try to answer them on the spot. Okay, so moving on, our next speaker is Mr. Paul Taylor. He is with the Oil and Gas and Energy Division of Standard Bank. Paul, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to try and share my screen. I'm not a WebEx expert, so hopefully it will come through. If not, I'm sure the organizers can take over. Oh, we've got something there. Can everybody see it, first of all? How do I get it on full screen?
You can see it, but it's very small. If you could put it in full screen.
So that would be that one. Hey, there we go. Well, thank you very much for having me, first of all. I'm going to chat a bit about how we see Mozambique at the moment in the context of post-Russia Ukraine, and also I've been asked to talk a little bit about financing. By brief way of introduction, I look after oil and gas for Southern Africa for Standard Bank, and in terms of Mozambique, I'm something of a veteran. I've been working on the various developments from the financing perspective since about 2011 and really 2012 in all seriousness. And I've written 3 studies over the years on various aspects. So a brief comment on the energy landscape to kick off. Firstly, fossil fuels taking on board oil, coal and gas, of which gas is the cleanest, continues to represent 82% of global primary energy consumption. This is not expected to change materially under the main energy scenarios that are published by the likes of the IEA STEP scenario, ExxonMobil or the US EIA, although some of them predict a rapid fall in emissions. In terms of CO2, Africa is a very small contributor. It's only about 3.8% of global CO2 emissions. And of course, one of the compelling aspects about LNG is that once it is combusted, its emissions in the power lens are about 40% lower than coal. And you also get significantly lower emissions of other substances such as SOx, NOx, lower water requirements and lower ash. Energy in the African lens is as much about development as anything else, especially if that energy is being exported. So it's really important to bear in mind that Mozambique's GDP per capita is still only $492 per head. So Mozambique is one of the poorest countries within the data set. And if you look at Sweden as an example, Swedish GDP per capita is around about $61,000. I'm just trying to, there we go, that's page down, is it? Yeah. It's worth talking about the energy landscape post COP26 in Paris and also post Russia Ukraine. Gas was already seen as a transition fuel before the Russia Ukraine conflict started. But what has absolutely been the case is that gas as a transition fuel has been reinforced on the one hand by Russia Ukraine, but also by the inability of renewable energy to really step up as a percentage of total energy demand, at least yet. And if we look here, Russia previously supplied, on the whole, about 167 BCM of piped gas, 124 million tons of LNG, that's 30% of the global LNG market, to Europe. That has now changed for a period of time. What's the period of time? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? We don't know. But what we do know is that the LNG market has a bright future. On the left-hand side, Shell, in their range, they expect a demand of about 700 million tons of LNG by about 2040. The current number, once Freeport LNG is fully working, which it is about 420, 430 million tons. And on the right-hand side, you see one of the more bullish projections, which is from next decade, a US LNG developer. And they see the same 700 million tons potentially being achieved by as soon as 2030. We don't know which demand projection is going to prevail, but what we do know is that Mozambique has got a bright future in there. To give you an example, one of the American companies, EQT Corporation, produced a very large report last year on unleashing US LNG, the largest green initiative on the planet, which saw 175 BCF a day of non-US coal to gas switching. Just to put it in perspective, Mozambique LNG and Rovuma LNG together, their gas production is only 4.5 BCF a day, or less than 3% of the addressable market. So turning to Mozambique, the building block of Mozambique is really the very solid contractual structure that's been in place since 2006. You had an exploration period, you had a 30-year development production concession, which runs from the POD approval of each discovery area. So in practice, you have 25 years commercial operations of each individual discovery area. And the convention and the taxation provisions for Mozambique are fairly conventional. You have cost gas, you have profit petroleum, you have royalties. But the major development of Mozambique that really took it into another level was the 2014 enactment of the decree law, which in essence allowed LNG project financings along the global norms to be developed in Mozambique. And to that extent, as was mentioned by INP, Coral FLNG raised project financing and Mozambique LNG raised project financing, and Rovuma LNG also raised financing prior to the force majeure. So in 2019, what we were expecting was the following. You had Coral, which had taken FID. You had first gas expected a few months ago. From the onshore side, Mozambique LNG had taken FID. Rovuma LNG was expected to take FID the following year. And then you had a series of project LNG developments, which would probably, but not certainly, be unitized. And at that time, the big deadline to bear in mind was that all PODs for the whole basin had to be submitted by the end of December 2023. Of course, as we know, the world is a little bit different. On the one hand, there's been COVID, which broadly speaking, depending on your geography, imposed a 1 to 2 year delay. And then, of course, in the Mozambican case for the onshore projects, but not for Coral, there was the insurgency in March 2021. So this is our expectation today in terms of Mozambique. Coral has sold its first cargoes. It's a great success. There is some debate around whether Coral 2 will go ahead. Obviously, prices are a little bit higher these days because of commodity inflation, but so much learning has been undertaken and there's economies of scale. It seems a project with some potential. Turning to the onshore projects, there are various public domain stories around the potential return of Mozambique LNG to site this year. Conditions have been put in the public domain around security, around socioeconomic development. We are confident and very hopeful that the project will return this year. What is also interesting is that Rovuma LNG has taken advantage of the ability to think and redesign caused by COVID and the insurgency, to make its project future-proof and really take on board the learnings of American LNG. So Rovuma LNG recently published a advert in the Mozambican press around a reconfiguration to 18 million tons of modular LNG. And our expectation is this project will take FID next year. Then, as before, we have the unitized trains, which we believe will occur, and Mozambique will be a large developer, as was planned before. I want to spend a minute or two on Domgas. INP just now mentioned the Domgas allocations of 900 scuffs a day over 2 phases. That is correct. But what is interesting at the moment is the combination of COVID and the insurgency really put a pause on the domestic gas plans. So Mozambique LNG has an initial allocation at Domgas of 100 scuffs per day, 50 scuffs per train. Rovuma LNG is 150 scuffs a day, 75 scuffs a train, inclusive of the Coral FLNG. But at the moment, there aren't identified customers for that domestic gas. Clearly as well, there's been a lot of technological development over the last few years. Small-scale LNG has come along, marine bunkering has come along. So I think an important debate will be what happens with domestic gas in the period after Mozambique LNG returns to site. How will the gas be allocated? Which projects will use the gas? And when will they take FID? So from the bank perspective, this is our sequence of projects. As you'll see, Coral continued despite COVID and the insurgency. We're hoping for Mozambique LNG to restart this year. We're hoping for progress on the Matola FSRU after Mozambique LNG. We're hoping for progress on Coral 2. And then next year, there'll hopefully be the Sasol PSA, which was referred to by IMP. Potentially, there could be a first DOM gas FID and also the Rovuma LNG FID. After that, there's a little bit of conjecture on our part because we don't know the specifics of when FIDs will occur and how big the LNG market will be. But we can see by the end of the decade that Mozambique can probably get to over 40 million tons, well on the way to perhaps long-term 60, 70 million tons, noting the 3-4 year delays. I just want to mention a couple of linkages to Mozambique. As we all know, Mozambique is a very large country, about 2,600 kilometers, and therefore its neighboring countries to the top and bottom are very important. At the bottom, South Africa is extremely important. For those of you who don't know, South Africa is having protracted power cuts. They're called load shedding, as much as 6 gigawatts at the moment, which could potentially go higher during the forthcoming winter period. Our expectation is that over time, 1, 2, or even maybe more LNG import terminals on the South African east coast may be built. And given the shipping distances, it's likely that these will ultimately be supplied by Mozambican molecules, even if the contractual names just say portfolio gas. South Africa has a very large installed power capacity, as much as 50 gigawatts. On any given day, maybe 20, 25 gigawatts is operational. So there's a very real demand for gas-fired power, which, as I've mentioned, would be supplied from Mozambique. And then we have the Tanzanian case. Tanzania found its gas at the back end of 2010 was their first discovery, only about 7 months after Mozambique. The politics in Tanzania slowed down the process from about 2015, but certainly following the accession of Her Excellency, progress has been fairly rapid on Tanzania LNG. Standard Bank led a study on the project, which was published in October 2022, and negotiations are very advanced for a host government agreement, which we hope is going to be a mix of the decree law and also the petroleum agreements in Mozambique, the EPCCs. Here we show a schematic which shows how close Mozambique LNG is to the Tanzanian development. Running northwest to southeast is only a distance of about 220 kilometers. The projects will now be built broadly at the same time. Our number for CapEx is around about $87 billion. So from an investor perspective, there are various local content and immediate opportunities. Maybe local content on a blended basis could be 10% of cumulative CapEx, say $9 billion. And there's also various indirect opportunities. In the document for Tanzania, we suggested a south extension of a pipeline. We suggested new transmission lines, a bridge over the Rovuma River, 2-country tourist visas, and there's also inland iron ore opportunities, something we're just starting to pick up on and do some work on. Obviously, Total have spent an immense amount of time over the last year on socio-economic development in Cabo Delgado, which we completely support. We're also starting to think a bit about biofuels. To the extent there's no food versus fuel conflict, biofuels seems a natural for southern Tanzania and northern Mozambique. It allows the agricultural communities to be employed to generate significant cash flows, and also allows each of Tanzania and Mozambique's increased liquid fuel demands to be met through biofuels blending. I just want to spend a minute or two on the conclusions and also talking a bit about financing, which I'll try and include in number 3. So from a big picture perspective, fossil fuels remain vital in the world's energy mix. They're about 82%. Most projections see a demand for gas literally going on in a significant way for 30 to 40 years. Certainly all of the projections that I believe in are in that camp. What is also happening from a gas perspective, as well as being used in gas to power and industry and heating, the mainstays, the global LNG business is starting to pick up customers and transportation. That's on the one hand, marine bunkering, the ships, but also lorries and trucks and mines and so on. So there's some very real opportunities there. What we would say in terms of the long-term demand for Mozambique's output, its target markets include China and India, both of whom have their political net zero target significantly after 2050. The timetable I've mentioned, but what is interesting around the timetable are the design consequences of the same. The world has changed. There's a drive towards net zero. We would expect both developments, Area 1 and Area 4, over time to move towards Scope 1 and 2 net zero, and the trains will either be optimized or they will be potentially redesigned or have additional equipment built into them. Something that we can see there is the use of electric drives. These are starting to be used in a lot of LNG trains in America and other markets, which reduce the emissions from gas turbines. And also going forward, we expect multi-products to be sold by the LNG projects. Condensate and LPG are probably inherent in the process, but we can see carbon capture and storage, we can see blue hydrogen, and we can see blue ammonia popping up. From a financing perspective, there's obviously a lot of talk in the market about the drive to net zero. What our expectation is for these projects is that, assuming the Mozambican LNG projects are Scope 1 and 2 net zero, that is, when the customer buys LNG at Mozambique, there will be a certificate to say there are net zero emissions. We believe that those projects will continue to be able to raise finance. Most of the export credit agencies are open for business. Certainly the big Asian countries who will buy demand by the LNG for a long period of time are open to provide financing. And we expect that the net zero certification will be enough to raise the necessary financing, subject to the issues such as security, which we're all aware of have to be solved. We expect that Coral will look to have a second phase. There's a 15 TCF field. Only 5 TCF is being used by Coral 1. But that's also important for Mozambique because it shows that Mozambique will be a pathfinder and a front runner in terms of floating LNG. And finally, in terms of Mozambique's synergies and linkages to the region, on the north, we note the good progress by Tanzania LNG, and we hope and expect there will be infrastructure integration, possibly local content, cooperation and integration, training and development, among others, between southern Tanzania and northern Mozambique, which will have economic benefits plus also security benefits. And then to the south and west, we expect the FID of the Matola FSRU will allow the long-term sale of perhaps 4 million tons of Mozambique's own LNG output to South Africa, and will facilitate greater connectivity across the southern region. So with that, I'll stop there, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really great and covered quite a lot, so I appreciate that. Also, I just wanted to mention that we do have offices in Tanzania, and if you're interested, reach out to us. We'll happy to make introductions. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Tiago Marques. He is the head of content for Africa at DMG Events. Tiago, over to you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Tiago. I'm responsible for the program of the summit, and I'm here to talk a little bit more about the event itself. This will be the 8th edition of the Mozambique Summit. It will be taking place, of course, 27th and 28th of September in Maputo, and will be with the full support of the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy, and in partnership with the NH, but also support of key stakeholders like INP, the USA's Commercial Service, and many other key institutions in country. I would also like to mention that the summit is always open by His Excellency the President Nyusi, who always officiates the event. Over the past 7 editions, we have welcomed around 10,000 delegates from all around the world, and last year we had 100 stands. This year we're looking at a bigger and better event. We're expecting a significant increase in the number of attendees, and we're expecting more than 150 stands with companies from around the world. We're actually working closely with our colleagues from the US to have a special area for US companies to be present at the event. This really shows the growth and interest in the country. The theme for this year is developing Mozambique's sustainable and integrated energy system. And I wanted to share a little bit of the key topics that will be covered at the event, but also were covered on the presentations before. Of course, we're going to talk about the latest opportunities in Mozambique's energy sector. We will cover the whole value chain, upstream, midstream, downstream, also with a strong component on power generation, like colleague Eleanor said, and also the ambassador mentioned also the renewable energies, wind, solar, hydro, etc. We'll also be looking into energy security, energy resilience, and Mozambique as a global energy supplier to the world. How will the sector look like? What opportunities lie ahead for American companies and for other partners from Mozambique? Other themes are infrastructure, project finance, energy transportation, LNG project implementation, and local content. We're very proud of our component in local content. We really try to bring national businesses and match them with international investors. We also strongly advocate for women empowerment, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and really looking at how the industry is nurturing the leaders of tomorrow. In terms of new features, I want to just highlight a few networking features we're going to have. We're going to have B2B meetings area. We're also going to have other areas for networking, such as, for example, the technical seminar area in the exhibition hall, where you will be able to present technical papers, special technologies. So contact us to present the technologies and papers and new innovations that your company is working on. Also the pre-Congress Masterclass, fully certified by CPD, and of course, our local content, diversity, equity, and inclusion forum. In terms of practical information, the delegate attendance fee is $2,750 for the full rate. However, we have an early bird until the 31st of May for $2,250. So if you want to do a saving of $500, please book your ticket as an attendee until the 31st of May. But if you want to have bigger exposure for bigger groups, please do contact us or the colleagues at the embassy. We'll be able to direct you to the right contacts. Mozambique and the United States have a strong partnership, and the country is welcoming American companies like yours to come and join forces and be part of the energy sector development. Mozambique wants to partner with you. You have the expertise, you have the know-how, the technology, and we hope you'll be part of this exciting next phase of the industry. For my part, I would like to thank Ambassador Women. I would like to thank our colleagues Taylor Moore, Daniel Donato, and Daniel Caltabiano for immense support. They've been tireless in putting together this session. We're very excited to work with them towards the event, and we're really looking forward for the US participation this year. We know companies are moving forward with the projects. There's no exploration taking place. There's a lot of opportunity at the moment, and we look forward to welcoming September. So for those of you in Maputo today, have a good evening. For those in America, have a fantastic day ahead. And we're now open to some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tiago. So as Tiago said, this now concludes the presentation part of our webinar. We do have time for some questions. I already see some of you have posted questions on the chat, which I'm just going to go ahead and read some of them. A question from Jonelle. Are there opportunities for gas pipeline construction companies? It's a great question. I'll ask Dr. José Branquinho if you think there are any opportunities there.
Hello. As we mentioned, we have a significant number of projects. We are talking about development projects. It's obvious that these development projects, some of them will entail the construction of pipelines from onshore. I'm sorry, from offshore to the onshore. So meaning that opportunities for pipeline companies, in fact, are available. And the companies providing these kind of developments, obviously, they will be tendering for such kind of supplies. No doubt about that.
Okay, thank you very much. I did like the comment on local content. We do support or encourage U.S. companies to partner with local companies to gain contracts. There isn't a local content law, but that is encouraged, and I think there will be something in the works there. So if you're coming into Mozambique, partnering with a local company is definitely going to be advantageous to you. I see a question on opportunities for small oil and gas service rigs and construction. I think this is going to be the same as you see the offshore projects are undergoing exploration. Those may need offshore rigs in the future. For the onshore, I think Dr. Branquinho, I think that's for you again. Are there any projects on the on onshore that would require rigs or?
As I have mentioned, we have some license onshore, and these licenses, although they are in different stages, in fact, they will require such kind of equipment to be made available. We mean drilling rigs. If these companies enters into drilling stage, they will need to have such kind of service. So it is also an opportunity that can be pursued.
I want to add that both the Total on Area 1 project and ExxonMobil on Area 4 have supplier registration platforms. Both of those are not actually sending out any tenders at the moment because both projects are on force majeure. But I do recommend that you register to those platforms if you want to be in the loop of what's coming up. I did answer 2 questions in the chat, but I did want to just share quickly. Kristen asked about offshore wind sites. So the Mozambique has not identified any sites yet. That being said, 3 of the big ports, one in the south, the center, and in the north, can handle or will likely be able to at least accommodate offshore wind equipment. And so this is very interesting. I think, Kristen, if you can reach out to us, would be very happy to explore that with you. Also a question from Ronald in regards to tenders for transmission cabling. EDM, which is the National Electric Utility, will launch these tenders. You remember Taylor Moore mentioned a hydro project called Mpandankua. This project is attached to a very long direct current transmission line that's valued over $1 billion. So there'll be plenty of opportunities there. And again, reach out to us. I put our office email on the chat, and we'll get back to you and set up a call and see if we can be useful to your expansions here. Okay, I see a question from Scott. When will the 7th licensing round begin? Dr. Branquinho, you were very popular today.
It's good to know that I'm popular. The 7th licensing round will probably take place next year. It is our general strategy to undertake bidding rounds every 2 to 3 years. So the last bidding round was back in 2021. So meaning that at the beginning of next year, we should have a new licensing round. That is the strategy that we pursue.
Okay, thank you. I see a question from Alpha Del. Can you provide contacts for local contractors and distributors who handle LNG projects? Again, I think at this point, you can either register on the supplier portals for Rovuma LNG or Mozambique LNG. I will write down those two names on your question. You can also reach out to us if you'd like to partner with a local contractor or distributor to supply equipment to these projects. Okay, I think I'm going to answer one more question. Are there a question from Guy? Any opportunities in decentralized solar battery storage in Mozambique? We are specialized in industrial solar battery projects and looking for businesses in Mozambique. Yeah, absolutely. So Taylor Moore mentioned that solar and wind are now very popular with the national utility. As you know, those don't produce power all day long, and so the national utility has realized that there needs to be a battery or energy storage components added to the energy mix. This is still new to Mozambique, but there are projects in very early stages that are being thought of. So I think that there is opportunity for you on the on-grid segment. The off-grid segment is managed by an institution called FUNAI, which is basically the National Fund for Electrification. And they are looking at hybrid systems for off-grid, remote villages, islands, and the such. So absolutely, please again reach out to us, and we can go into depth and see if there is a specific project for you. Okay, so we are well over time here, so I just wanted to again thank all the speakers for your time. Thank all the attendees for listening to us. I certainly will be attending the Mozambique Gas Summit in September. Again, there's a US pavilion there, and we hope to see you there. And have a good rest of your day. Thank you all.